Good morning, everybody, and thank you for all being here. This is very exciting. I'm on the co-chair of the Real Estate Council, so helped put this project together with our other council members, and it's been a thrill, and we're so happy that there's so many people here today. So I don't need to get into my background, but I have 4 great panelists here, and I'm going to have each person present a little bit about themselves and their company, and then we'll go into some of the questions, and we'll save some time for Q&A. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Victoria. Victoria is with WS, and your motto is, "We create places." So Victoria, if you could spend 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, just your background, what WS does, and talk about one project that you think might be interesting that you've recently done in the Boston market.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. As Rachel mentioned, I work for WS Development, and the motto is really what drives us. We create places people love. We spend a lot of time and effort not only focused on what's happening inside the buildings that we are building as developers, but also how those buildings interact with the community around them and the people that visit them every day. It's something that drove me to WS Development. I have a public policy and community planning background, and so that interaction between the human element of what makes a neighborhood feel special, what makes you want to keep coming back and experiencing the different things that happen day to day, to what happens inside the buildings, what businesses want to locate there, what retail tenants are best suited to make the neighborhood vibrant. All of that comes together to make a place very special, and I think that that's what is so exciting about being in the development industry, is it's finding the right secret sauce to really make your project thrive. And I'm pleased to be here today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Victoria. Next, I'd like to welcome Romaine, like the lettuce. And sorry, I had to make sure I got that.
It's fine.
I had to make sure I was pronouncing it correctly. Amma's with a company called Progress Residential, and when we spoke about this conference, because she's on the residential side and I wasn't familiar with her group, I asked her to tell us more about your company, and she said that her company is the, quote, human component for residential property managers. So with that said, Amma, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling the audience here a little bit more about your company.
Sure. So I actually came to Progress Residential from a pretty lengthy period in hospitality. I started my career at Choice Hotels in hospitality, and then transferred to Hilton. Worked on represented. I'm a lawyer, so I represented companies that own, manage, and franchise hotels. And one of the things that people don't often think about is that hotels are not only places for short-term transient stays. People also live in hotels, and we know that. And then sort of like the continuum of housing is you can live in hotels, but then also people live in homes. And one of the things the perspective that I try to bring to my company is people think of housing and providing service for people who live in housing as very transactional. But we really do need to think about having a hospitality mindset, because so Progress is a property manager for single-family rental homes. We manage about 90,000 rental homes across the country, primarily in the Smile States. We're owned by Pretium, which is an investment advisor, investment manager, and they manage the funds that own our homes. I often, I've been in real estate for a long time, and real estate can make money with people spending no money, right? It sort of just can make money over time. But income-producing real estate really relies on treating people well so that they're willing to spend their money so that you can continue to drive revenue. And that, I think that our industry is relatively new. It's about 10 years old, maybe about 12. And I think in the early days when we started buying these homes and people needed places to rent coming out of the financial crisis, the business ran itself. But over time, people have options, they have choices, and renting is a part of the continuum of housing, so people can choose to move on and buy homes. So we really have to think about how we provide the service that we do, and we are on a path right now to be very resident-centered in the way that we provide service, and also being stakeholder-driven. So we don't only think about our investors, we think about our investors, we think about regulators, we think about residents. That's a little bit about me and about the company, and excited to be here.
Thank you. Tom O'Brien, HYM Investment Group. I think most people here know you, but if you wouldn't mind telling us about your background, your company, and if you would also describe one of the most recent projects you've worked on in Boston, I think the audience would find that very interesting.
Sure. Hey, good morning, everybody. I have to, Rachel, just first say, look at the space. I actually, when I got this invitation, one of the best parts of being here was I get to come into this building after watching it be constructed over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think it was delivered about a year ago. Victoria and I were talking about this just before this. I would just say to everybody, before you leave here, just take this view in of the river and the city, and then there's an outdoor space, just a reminder, I know you've walked past it, but just step into that outdoor space. What BU has done here in partnership with the city is unbelievable. So I just, first of all, we should celebrate this space, which is really, really wonderful. And it, you know, it's not every day that an institution takes a risk on the design of this kind of a building and the production of this kind of space. Most institutions would choose to be a little bit more conservative, let's say. So we should celebrate BU and what you've done here. This is like an amazing space. So for me, again, Tom O'Brien, the name of our company is the HYM Investment Group. My background is I grew up here in Boston and worked in City Hall. I was the director of what was then known as the Boston Redevelopment Authority, which for those of you who don't know, Boston has had for a long time a combined planning and development entity called the BRA, and I ran that in the 90s during Tom Menino's first 2 terms. Tom Menino was a 20-year mayor here and a great mentor for me. I was 29 years old when I went in and took that job, which was a great opportunity for a kid who grew up around here. After I left, then I joined a company called Tishman Speyer, which is a large international company. I learned a lot about how to raise capital, how to manage large projects, and then I sort of got it in my head to try and do this for myself. I have 3 partners, 3 great people who I've been with for almost 19 years at this point, and we work on what we think are some of the more complicated mixed-use projects in the greater Boston area. Certainly, the 2 of the companies to my right, WS and Noannet, are going to, you know, you guys are equally as good. We think we're good at this stuff as well. We're all, you know, sort of competitors, but friends, I think. And so I'd say the one project I would choose that I'm most proud of in the last couple of years is we took on the redevelopment of what was then called the Government Center Garage. So for those of you who are familiar with Boston, I'm probably a little bit older than many of you. I'm 60 years old, but the Government Center Garage was a 2,800 space, huge municipal garage, which was probably the biggest planning mistake ever made by any city in the history of the planet. That was built above Congress Street in downtown Boston in the late 1960s, and it existed for a long time. And we had an idea of maybe we could redevelop that site and demolish that garage in phases over time and build new buildings. We're about 3/4 of the way through that whole process with 2 buildings to go. We've delivered the first 2 buildings, one of which is the headquarters building for State Street Financial. It's called One Congress. It's a beautiful building. It's actually, you can see it from that corner over there to take a look at it. We're really pumped about the design and kind of where it is from just a beauty perspective, an architectural perspective, and we delivered it 100% leased, which is, from a business perspective, awesome. So that's me.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Last but not least is Jordan. And Jordan, I've known Jordan for many, many years, and he is the proud owner and developer of Raffles, our newest luxury hotel in Boston. So Jordan, if you could just a little bit on your background and then maybe talk about the Raffles development.
Sure. So I want to second Tom's comment. I've never been in this building. I've driven past it from both sides and just thought what an incredible piece of architecture. And that's actually something that a lot of us on the stage have in common. There's a lot of pedestrian architecture that you see around the city and around the country. And there are a smaller number of projects that really care about what the what their impact is on the environment around them. They're not just built to quickly and cheaply, but built to really create spaces that people like to be in. I remember when there were 2 projects going up on Route 9, not far from here, and WS was doing the street on one side of the street, and there was the old Stop and Shop site being redeveloped on the other side of the street. And one of them went up, and it had landscaping, and it had beautiful lighting, and it had great exterior architecture. And the other was just the back of a bunch of buildings. And I thought, Victoria's company really did it right. They created a beautiful place. And again, if you see what Tom's done over at Government Center Garage and the other things that he's done, they care about what it looks like and what the impact is for the city. Unfortunately, Anna, I don't know your projects yet, but I look forward to hearing a lot more. But I worked for 2 companies before starting Noannet. And one of them, their CEO took over the company about 50 years ago, and he's done 7 projects in 50 years. But they've all been landmark projects. They've all been beautiful buildings. The second company I worked for puts up 7 buildings every 12 months, more or less. They have done incredibly well financially, but it's harder to remember any of the buildings because they're a little bit more mass production. So when I started my company, I decided to go in the direction of the first company that I worked for. And we're on our 6th project in 15 years, so a little bit more prolific than the first one. But we've also taken the approach of everything we do, we want it to really be an important building for whatever neighborhood it's in. And so with Raffles, that Rachel asked that I talk about, we wanted to create a 5-star hotel and residential building in the city that really stood out from the pack of the other 5-star type hotels. And by the way, we did not have a dream to do this. We bought a tired old 8-story, 63-key tourist hotel that we were going to put a couple of stories on top and make into a very nice Residence Inn or Hilton Garden or something like that. And we didn't do our due diligence well enough. It was a very tight time frame competition. We won the competition and then discovered that there were massive seismic problems and ADA problems and all of that. And we went to Tom's former boss, Mayor Menino, and said, hey, we can't preserve this building. We think we should go up. And Menino said, go for it, even though you're not remotely zoned and it's going to be an endless battle. So the Back Bay neighborhood where Raffles is located has a lot of tall buildings. The Hancock Tower is across the street. There's the new Related building, which is 35 stories next door to us and all of that. But every one of those projects was spot zoned, so to speak, through one of varying development processes. They were zoned one at a time. There was never comprehensive zoning there. As an aside, one of our biggest problems in the city that we don't have real comprehensive zoning anywhere. But it needed to be individually zoned. And so long process that I'll cut short, but it took us 5 years, mainly due to the opposition of the building next door that was the exact same height as ours, but didn't want any neighbors. And I'll get to the punchline of why I'm telling you that later. So Raffles was, are people here familiar with the Raffles chain? There's only one in the US, so a lot of people don't know the name. It's an international chain, originally comes from Singapore, now based in Paris, that is at the high end of hospitality, equivalent to Peninsula and Rosewood and some of the smaller luxury chains like that. Now, I just used the forbidden word, the L word. During our marketing, during our design, we would not allow anybody to use the L word, the most overused word in marketing, and any of you that are going to development, I beg you not to use that damn word. It means nothing these days. Don't use the L word, don't use the B word, bespoke, that word's even worse. Just build beautiful buildings. And what we tried to do with Raffles is build a beautiful building with, we said the F word is the only word you're allowed to use, and not that F word either. The F word was fun, and we wanted to make high-end buildings fun. So we've got 5 food and beverage outlets. We've got different design in every space in the building. We've got formal restaurants. We've got sort of a crazy late-night speakeasy. We had 5 different designers in the building. And the goal was just to make it a fun building. So I know I've already talked longer than everybody else, so I'll shut up and leave it for questions.
Okay. No, it's okay. I have one question. What would you do differently what would you do differently today for this development if you had go back in time? What changes might you have made?
I would not break ground 3 months before a pandemic.
Okay. It's a great answer. Okay. Perfect. More hotel rooms, less hotel rooms, more condos, less condos?
Actually, the mix is very good. We'll get into it later. The difficulty is really making something very high service work in a very high labor cost environment.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. So I have a few questions that I'm going to ask, and just go down the line, and to see if you can respond. If you don't want to just pass, say pass. So the first one involves macroeconomic trends, and I thought about that driving in and waiting for the information on tariffs and what that means. So if each of you, and Tom, I'll start with you, what are some of the macroeconomic trends and issues that we have today? Migration, tariffs, interest rates, some of these key things. How is that impacting your view of development going forward?
Oh my God, right? So, Rachel, as you're asking the question, I think I might structure my response both in terms of my own personal feelings, my response, and
Sure.
my professional responsibilities. I would say, just as I think this through, I'm a disciple of a journalist named Tom Friedman. I don't know if folks read him. He's in the New York Times. He has a great article this morning in which he's basically, this is my personal response first, if I could. Basically what he's saying is, I visited an amazing development in Shanghai, China, and the future is not with the U.S. anymore. It's here. You should read it, and it talks a lot about kind of where we are. And I think for those of us who care deeply about this city, care deeply about this country, and care deeply about our own careers, what's happening right now is shocking and terrible. And I think the only answer is for us to stand up and be heard about it. It is, for us, just as a business matter, it's important to note, and Friedman points this out this morning, that chaos is not a strategy. Trust is the only way to make deals work, to make business work, to make government work. And that's lacking. And we're destroying the trust that we built up as a nation for over 100 years. And I would say, too, if I just add one more quick thing, the other thing that's happening is for over 100 years, the U.S. has been known as an entity that is special, that is a place where people want to come to, where we stand for science and we stand for unquestioned ability to speak your mind, and we are losing that. And as we lose that, there is a business case to be made that when we lose that, we are injuring our nation. So I think people need to stand up and do that. For my wife and I, that's a big part of who we are and what we're all about on our little platform with our little 5 kids, but that's a big piece. So my personal reaction is to the macro pieces that are happening here is, as much as I'm disgusted by what happened to that graduate student in Somerville and all those different pieces, and I fear for my children's lives, I would say too, though, it is affecting us on a macro business-like place. And what, pisses me off the most is the larger corporate entities who do not stand up and say it because they know the truth. Sorry. On the business side, for us, we're trying to build more buildings, and the tariff pieces, no question, have made it more difficult to do this. We need more housing desperately in Boston. We need thousands of units of housing. And so for us to try to build our next group of housing projects, and I'm sure you guys will say the exact same thing, the effort to kind of hold the line on pricing and understand where pricing is going to be. Essentially what subcontractors are doing right now is they're saying, hey, listen, we got to build in some measure of comfort in our pricing as to what the cost of steel is going to be, what the cost of concrete is going to be, what the cost of lumber is going to be. And it's making it ever, ever harder for us to build new housing projects in Boston. So it's clearly affecting our business. This is not an administration that is a pro-business administration. Chaos is not a pro-business strategy. Predictability and trust are pro-business strategies. It's affecting us in a big way. Sorry.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
I live with a woman, my roommate, my wife is, she wakes up every day and says to me, what are you doing today to address the issues that are happening in the world? So I'm sorry, you just got a full download of that.
Okay, thank you. Amma, you're on the residential side. What are some of the macroeconomic factors that impact your business?
So I want to start by saying I love your answer. And it's a really tough act to follow, but it's really all related. I will also add that as a lawyer, one of the other challenges in our current environment is the challenge to the rule of law, and that is something that has always been very, that's it's very American. As someone who didn't even grow up here, I can tell you that it is unique to America, and it is something that's very special that we have to really try to preserve. So getting off of that, soapbox, you talked about the need to build housing. So the industry that I'm in, we buy homes, we rent the homes that we purchase to people who probably can't afford to buy or who choose not to buy. There are a lot of people, a lot of politicians that don't really like our industry. They view this as an affront to the American dream. But there are many people, I think people who want to access homes that they can purchase, feel that investors buying homes are taking those opportunities away. But one of the things that we do know, if you look at the macroeconomic landscape, is that we have a shortage of housing in this country. And the shortage of housing means that we have a shortage of affordable housing in this country. And we need more builders to build more housing. Our Pretium is the firm that owns Progress. And one of our portfolio companies actually helps to provide liquidity to builders, because in this kind of environment where where builders may not be able to build homes and knowing that they can sell them all, if we take those homes off of builders, which we have done, so we've purchased and built to rent communities, then it allows builders to be able to build more. So we put liquidity back in the system that way. And we really believe that this is a time where we need really smart people, thoughtful people creating solutions that are really going to drive the kinds of changes that we need. And the big changes that we really need more housing in this country. In terms of what it means for our business, because we rent homes in an environment where interest rates are really high and it's really hard for people to purchase, obviously more people are renting. And because we rent single-family homes, there are a lot of people, a lot of families who apartments are just not the right unit for them. And so having more homes like ours is good, but we haven't been buying as many homes in the past few years, other than build-to-rent homes. But the environment for people who are landlords is actually pretty good. I think the responsibility that we have is to figure out how to look, renting housing is it's occupancy, right? It's rate and occupancy. So when you have a lot of demand, you can obviously push rents, but I think we are being very thoughtful about making sure that we preserve affordability where we can, and then that we're also delivering the kind of service that people expect.
Okay, thank you. Victoria, how WS, what are the macroeconomic factors that you see shaping your company's growth?
So in order to not be repetitive, because I think what Tom and Emma have covered really hit the nail on the head, one of the things that we've seen is really, what is going to be the future coming back from COVID, right? We get that question a lot. Are people coming back to the office? Are people back out shopping? And I think what we're seeing is that, yes, the people who want to be in a communal environment, want to interact in person, are willing to do that and are actually willing to make the commitment, both financially but also policy-wise, to bring people back in. I think the challenge we're finding with that is that given the tough financial market, the tough regulatory market, the stratification between those highly desirable locations that are driving people back in, that people are wanting to be, and the rest of the kind of peripheral environments are not seeing the same spillover effect, or they're not benefiting as much because things are so constrained. So I think we are seeing on a macro level, the highest, most desirable places are really coming back in full force and are very vibrant, but some of the periphery markets are struggling to kind of rebound from that COVID work from home environment where people got very comfortable. So I think that, on another side of the coin, as people are looking at where they're putting their money and how they're going to invest, we're seeing a real kind of division between some of the top tier, really desirable mixed use settings, and then some of the more,
Since work from home is a big deal for what's your view on when that's Is it changing? When will it change?
We are bullish on, the fact that it is changing. We are seeing our company personally believes very strongly in in-person work, but also some of our key tenants are asking their workforce to come back in person as well. So we do think that shift is happening. Will it ever fully come back? No, I don't think so. But I think there are a lot of industries, hospitality being one. These are jobs where you have to be there in person. But also some of the office environments are recognizing the need for, as you're bringing on new talent and training people, that imparting that knowledge is just so much easier to do when you're back in person and establishing those relationships. So yes, I think it will come back and it'll be strong, but in some of the core areas.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Jordan, I don't know, for Raffles, is there these macroeconomic factors, are they impacting your business here or some of the other businesses you're working on?
Well, I wouldn't say the Raffles is as much the place that I'd focus on here. It's getting things built. All of us up on the stage here are in the business of building things, of creating places, of owning places that people can live or work or shop or stay. And for the economics to work, whether it's a residential project or a hotel, you need to be able to show the people that are providing the money to build it, that the return at the end of the day is going to be worth them putting their money in. And if the construction costs have gone up by 70% in 5 years, if interest rates that were on their way down prior to the election are now stabilizing, potentially going back up again, the returns that the lenders are looking for are not going to be there unless rents or ADRs go up proportionally. And I don't think there's anybody other than people that own existing apartments that think rents going up is a good thing right now. ADRs are not just going to go up because you say they're going to go up. And so if the macroeconomic trends, as Tom said, are creating instability and lack of confidence, then you're not going to see things getting built. And you're not going to see any kind of cure to the housing situation if you can't build more housing. We have a basic supply and demand problem in this city and in this state and in this country. And as Amma and I were talking about before, there's only one topic that unites left and right, black and white, liberal and conservative all over the country. And that principle is whatever you want to build, don't build it here. And so you've got that pressure all over the country. And unless you can have the economy at a level that supports building things at affordable levels to help you get through the fact that you've got all these political NIMBY winds against you, nothing's going to get built and we're going to have a crisis forever. And just to wrap up on the point that Tom made, I sat in a 13-hour conference on Monday with a bunch of people focused on what we can do to keep the country from really being destroyed by what's happening right now. And I can't echo Tom's point enough that everybody needs to wake up every morning and say, what am I going to do? Reposting something or writing a check is not enough right now. People need to get involved. And if we don't want these macroeconomic forces to make it really difficult for everybody that's graduating from BU to go out and do what they want to do, people need to carve out a part of their day, a part of their week to get involved and find organizations where you can make a difference.
There is a gathering, by the way, this Saturday, the 5th, I think it is, on the Common, if people feel like-minded and want to show up and stand up. Sorry, we'll just point that out.
Thank you. And Jordan, that leads to my next question, which was about capital markets and financing. And I'll go to you, Victoria. How is WS getting financing on some of these new projects you're working on?
I'll be frank, it's very difficult. And echoing what the other panelists have said, it's going to be very difficult to move any project forward given the current environment. Between the tariffs, the interest rates, there's just a number of factors working against us at the moment. And it's unfortunately dampened the market. And I think we're all waiting to see what the true fallout of even today's announcement will bring.
So do you just sit and wait? I mean, do you sit and wait, or do you try to come up with a different solution? I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot of planning that can be done. I don't believe in sitting and waiting, and I think anybody who's done any of these large projects, you talked about a 5-year process to permit and get your project built. There is plenty of work to be done in down times. I was with the state during the last economic downturn, and we took it as an opportunity. And so I think reframing the conversation around what can we do, how can we plan, how can we best set ourselves up to be prepared to take advantage of a rebound when that happens. I believe we're resilient, and I believe we will get there. So I think that is sort of the approach right now is, while we're not unfortunately able to break ground, there's plenty of other planning and design work that we can be doing to set ourselves up.
Can I say that one of the things, so in addition to leading the legal department, I'm also responsible for government relations. And I know that talking about public-private partnerships is one of the things we want to discuss today, but I think one of the things that we can do, and I think this speaks to this whole concept of what can we do, is really engage locally, right? So building is actually a hyper-local activity. Housing is a hyper-local activity. And even though there are these, the headlines tend to be very national, the things that happen on the ground to make projects go forward happen locally. And I think there's real value in going in and having conversations with local leaders. Politicians are not good, at headlines, right? Because they're just going to take a headline and stick with it, and they're not brave. So they're always thinking about their votes. But I think that when you can get people in one-on-one conversations and you can really talk about the issues, you can start changing hearts and minds. But you're not going to do it by posting online. It's just not going to do it, right? But I have found that even where our industry is one that people uniformly on both sides, they hate what we do. When we go in and we talk about how we can be helpful by providing housing like this at scale and the kinds of things that we can make possible, like law enforcement housing initiatives that might allow, frontline workers to be able to live in communities that they might not be able to afford, like housing choice vouchers at scale, like trying to make that system a little bit more, make it work, frankly, right, and a little bit more efficient because it's so bureaucratic. There are ways that business can help, and we really have to I think we have to talk, right? That's a part of what COVID, I think, has done. We've just sort of retreated to our spaces and we don't talk, and therefore we have chaos that's unfolding. And I think it's just really important for us to get out there and go meet with our local leaders and share our viewpoint and talk about how we're affected as students, how we're affected as business people, and help them to see, help them to understand what they can do also, right? We're not all totally it's not like we can't do anything.
Okay, thank you. Tom, you have a few projects that you're working on. Suffolk Downs, I guess, the government. How do you get your projects financed today? What's your secret?
I agree with Victoria. It's a challenge, obviously. So Suffolk Downs, for those folks here who are not familiar, was a former horse racing track here in Boston. About 2/3 of the site is in East Boston. 1/3 is in the city of Revere, which is the neighboring community. So we purchased that site together with a group of partners in 2017. We went through a 3-year permitting process, during which my partner and I, we do all this community engagement stuff ourselves, all that community work ourselves, and so we did probably 450 different public meetings to get through that process. We happen to be people who love doing that work, and so we're really proud of where we are. We've completed the first residential building there. It's about a 475 unit building, so pretty good size. The lease up is actually going pretty well right now. So to the housing demand piece, there is a significant amount of demand for this product, and so the lease up is going well. We have a second building, which is another 475 units, and I would say, just to Victoria's point, it's difficult. Typically, our projects are financed. Our projects are almost across the board, are all built by union labor. We're proud to work with a union workforce that shows up every day, trained and ready to go, and for whom safety is important. So that often positions us to make it possible for our projects to be financed with pension funds, retiree pension funds. And so the first project was financed in that way. We're close on the second project. I would if I could just give a couple of shout outs. The governor and lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, have been a huge help with us to try and get there. And the mayor of Revere, Mayor Patrick Keefe, has also been really great. So I think if you work together, it requires a team effort. I mean, these things, in 2018, it was easier. You could underwrite to a 5.5%. If you wanted to build a housing project, you could underwrite to a 5.5% return on cost. And if you got there, boom, you were ready to go. There was construction debt available for you. There was equity available for you. Today, you have to underwrite to about a 6.5%, and it's got to be a solid 6.5%. They have to believe in the rents. They have to believe in all those different pieces, and your construction costs have to be nailed down. So you need help. You need everybody working together, from government and to all of us on our team, to the construction trades, to the financing group. And so we're almost there. I think we're going to be able to get that one underway this year, which is great. And it will probably be financed, as I said, with a company. I'd just add one other quick thing. The debt markets have actually recovered quite a bit. So there's a lot of debt that's available. It's sort of a shift of where things were a year ago. Debt was harder to find a year ago, and equity was a little bit more available. Today, it's sort of the opposite. There's more debt available, or more readily available, and equity is a little bit more of a challenge. But I'd say we're on the 10 or 5-yard line trying to punch it through.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
I think we have 4 minutes. I have other questions, but actually, before I do that, let me make sure that I get audience participation. So if we could take a few questions, we have 5 minutes, I think. So.
I just want to say thank you for all of your insightful perspectives. I appreciated the different takes, but Ms. Romaine, you mentioned the housing shortage, especially multifamily. What are your guys' thoughts on BlackRock acquiring 40% of pretty much every multifamily home in the country? I know, as you said, Thomas, that, as a local Bostonian as well, like, I'm trying to buy a house at some point, and we're in one of the most expensive markets in the country. So what are your guys' thoughts on the BlackRock situation? How should we kind of combat that, if there is a way to?
My thoughts. That's really funny. Okay, so it's hard, right? It's so interesting because I've been sort of hyper-focused on the resistance to institutional owners owning single-family homes. I actually spent quite a bit of my career in Blackstone portfolio companies and at Blackstone, so I know that institutional owners have owned multifamily buildings for a very long time. It is like a part of that's just a part of how our society works. And I will tell you that if I think about how we respond on the single family side, I'll stick there because I'm more comfortable with the data there and the trends there. The reality is, it's the shortage of supply, right? Like, if we had more units being built, more people could access. There are two things. More people need more access to units, and then we have like a mortgage system that's also really old and hasn't really evolved, and when it did, it was a disaster, so now it's like really stuck. But I think what we say and what we have consistently said is, if there was more supply, if there were ways to increase supply, more people would have more access to more homes. That is really the bottom line. And then, there are a lot of things that people are not really thinking about, right? Which is that builders, we've had some discussions here about people being able to get returns on the projects that they build. So a lot of builders don't really build starter homes the way they used to because they can't pencil the returns. So that also, constrains supply at the levels where people like you want to get in. So I think this is why we need to be really thoughtful. We need solutions. We need people who are really like thinking about the problem and thinking about how can we add to the supply and how can we make products available so that more people can access, more people, students and people who are starting out can be able to access homes, right? So I'm not really, I feel like the Blackstock buying the 40%, it might be like a market factors, because I'm not sure who else was ready to buy what they bought, right? Because that's also a part of the reality. Like, the homes that we buy are homes that are homes that people would not want to buy as starter homes because we put, like, on average about $30,000 into a home that we purchased. When I bought my first home, I could barely afford the first thing that broke, right? So we really do have to think about just, those things are challenging to hear about, but we really do have to figure out how to increase supply of housing.
Can I add one quick thing?
Sure.
This is not a complicated issue. And I think people need to understand it took us probably 30 or 40 years to get to this point. So in other words, it didn't just happen last year or the year before. We just, for 20, 30, 40 years, we have not built enough housing. Just in Greater Boston, we're probably, I think the governor put out a report that said we're 220,000 units short of where we should be. I actually think that's light. That number is light. I think it's probably closer to 300,000 units of housing. So it's actually not a complicated policy issue. We just need to build more housing. I mean, I'm sorry to say this to you. My wife and I got married in 1993. We bought our first house in 1994 here in Boston, about a mile from here. We paid $190,000 for a 3-bedroom house. I worked for the BRA. I think I made $90,000 a year. She worked for Verizon. She made more than I did. She always made more than I did. And so she made like $120,000 a year. So based on that, we could make it work. Housing prices have far outstripped what that starter couple was making now, right? Obviously, because we haven't built enough supply. It's going to take us 10 years to work out. It's not a complicated policy thing. We just got to build them. That's the key.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Next question.
Just to continue this really, really important conversation, Jordan mentioned NIMBYism, and one thing we haven't talked a lot about is zoning, but Tom, you mentioned all those meetings that you had. So there's obviously very important reasons and protections that come from zoning, but is Ezra Klein right that we have to
Yes.
make change
Yes.
dramatically?
I'm also a disciple of Ezra Klein. In addition to Tom Friedman, read everything and listen to everything that Ezra Klein and Tom Friedman put out. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, just for people that aren't familiar with Ezra Klein, he coined a phrase called the everything bagel, which is a big problem in addition to the pressures we've talked about before with construction costs and interest rates, where very well-intentioned people want every project that is built to be perfect in every way. So I've got a project that is deep into permitting right now that we're discussing how sustainable, how much affordable housing, how big the bike room, everything else that is a laudable public goal, but you add them all together and they add 10, 20, 30% to the cost of housing. So Ezra Klein point, and there's a book that he just published a couple of weeks ago called Abundance that really explains this in a really great way, and I encourage people to read this book, is saying, hey, we've all got great objectives, but we can't solve every problem with every project. And let's pick what we want to solve, and maybe to get this apartment building built in an area that can't sustain high rents, it might not be able to be Passive House certified. It might be LEED Silver instead of LEED Platinum or whatever, but you've got to get things built. And to the point that everybody else has made up here, once again, it's supply and demand. So much demand for housing, not enough supply, and what happens? Massachusetts is losing people. Mm-hmm. And when Massachusetts loses people, and New York loses people, and California loses people, they go to red states. And there's a big concern, I'm getting political again, sorry, but in 2030, there's going to be a different looking electoral college map where there are fewer blue state votes and more red state votes because the blue states can't build housing. And that's why Ezra Klein, a liberal writer, has come and said, hey guys, we got the right goals, we're doing it wrong, and we're part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Do we have time? I know this is blinking. Do we have time for one more? Or who's ever? One more. Josh? Okay. Oh, sorry, Josh.
I personally think a lot about the Empire State Building, not just because I love Art Deco architecture, but from a speed of execution standpoint. 1 year of design, 1 year, 45 days to complete. And the safety record is not sort of the whole story, right? 5 fatalities, but on a rate of sort of per 100,000, it's only 33% higher than what we experience today, right, in 2023. So the question I have for you as builders, and I think that last question kind of got us a little bit there, but could you articulate further, just sort of from a speed of execution standpoint, why projects take so much longer today when you're actually kind of in the ground, putting up sticks, trying to build something, as opposed to, and we just had a panel on technology, 1929, we don't have computers, but we can build something in a year and 45 days that stands the test of time and is still, an iconic landmark.
Can I do this one just because I had this conversation
Sure.
recently about the Empire State Building. So for us at Suffolk Downs, the 3-year process, we actually embraced it. We loved it, honestly. Doug Mans, who's my partner, we were out, 3 or 4 nights a week meeting with people, doing that kind of stuff. So I think my point is what's needed is balance. It's not, you don't want to move the needle too far one way or the other. Some of the things that are discussed in this process, transportation, environmental, open space, public access, these are important issues, and it's perfectly fine. Honestly, the Empire State Building was built in the 1930s. 5 worker deaths is 5 way too many, and we can't have that, right? I challenge the question of whether the Empire State Building is a really good example today. I think we've gotten to the point where we can have really good conversations about these things. What's required is leadership. So what we need is among, kind of executives. When I say executives, I mean elected executives, company executives, finance executives. Everybody needs to be working together. You can't be shouting at each other over the fence. It takes leadership and working together and just focusing on getting things done together. It's not wrong to go through this process and work your way through it. For the private sector people, for all of us up here, I think we all come from the same. Victoria worked in government. I worked in government. We have a deep amount of respect for the service of government. I love it. I'd love to go do it again. And it's fun to work in government, and you have to respect that and respect the job that people do on that side. But we all have to work together to find the balance of what it takes to get things done.
I'd like to throw out one thing that's a little bit controversial. Tom might not agree with me on this one, but there are constituencies that keep things from being done more efficiently. Another thing that Ezra Klein has written about is one of the first large-scale modular projects was done out in San Francisco, and it was a huge success, saved huge amounts of time, huge amounts of money, and he said it may never get done again because the unions don't like it because there's so many fewer jobs needed on site to create it. And the unions are against modular housing here in Massachusetts because they will lose jobs. And so it's the same issue with electric cars. The auto workers don't like them because it takes half as many workers to build an electric car as it takes to build a gas-powered car. And the auto repair shops don't like it because they don't break as much and you need fewer people to repair them. So you've got concerns on the one side that you're destroying jobs by building modular homes or electric cars or whatever, versus the good that they both cause. And I see Tom ducked out on that one, but because it is. There's a whole long answer. Yeah. but so it's a constituency problem. We can build modular, but there are forces against it. And that's one way to speed things up.
And that's government, right? So, and I know that's like such a charged word right now, but I always like to give the example of Uber, because when Uber started, there was so much resistance to Uber because they were gonna upend taxis, and taxis were not gonna make any money. And really what's happened by them staying the course through is they've democratized it, right? More people have access to being able to make money as taxis. But the resistance, I think people often forget, was very real. And the regulatory pressure that they faced was very, very significant. So I think that we do have to force these conversations and really push through and get past people's initial fears, because there's always that sort of fear that if the zero-sum game, if this happens, then I'll lose. And we have to get past that in order for us to solve some of these problems.
I think we're going to be out of time, unfortunately. So this is a great panel. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to us today.